Are your architectural set of plans actually lacking important detail, or is the permit set that you get back from the city sufficient to build your healthy home? This and many other questions that have come up in a critical stage of building your healthy home, in this pre-planning stage. That's what I'm going to be talking about today. But first, I'm Christine. I'm a licensed general contractor here in Southern California, and we have consulted on numerous healthy home builds all over the US. And this is one that is so important to get right. It's your pre-planning stage. So let's back up even further and talk about what are the stages of a new build project, specifically a custom new build project. You're going to be hiring an architect, a contractor, and you're going to get to building. But first, there's two stages. There's pre-planning, pre-construction, design development. These are all before any construction ever begins. Let's call it your phase one, your pre-planning stage. Then there's construction. Consider this your phase two. This is when all of the hard work you've put into designing and planning your project, construction. That's implementation stage. Something I'm very clear about is that construction should purely just be implementation. There should not be strategy and material selections during construction. That is going to take place before construction begins, so that your construction phase should just be smooth sailing. So with that in mind, there is such an emphasis I place on your pre-construction. A lot of people want to breeze through it. A lot of homeowners just want to get to the floor plan, get through the architectural process, push through it, design all of their beautiful bathrooms and kitchen, and get to construction. But I want to tell you this, that the more time you spend in the pre-construction phase, the smoother construction will actually go. So let's talk about what your pre-construction phase should actually look like and how to spot if your plans might be lacking really important detail. So you're going to hire an architect, hopefully an architect, not just a draftsman. There is a difference, and I've done a whole episode about that. But an architect is going to have the skill set to actually create a robust set of construction drawings. So in the architectural stage, you're going to have some phases within that. You're going to hire the architect. Then they're going to work on something called schematic design. That's where they might be hand drafting. It might be very loose. They're showing general layout. But before they put anything into like formal drawings, they're going to do this schematic phase where you're talking about bedrooms, bathrooms, square footage. Do you want one story? Do you want two stories? Do you want a basement? That's all in the schematic stage. Then from there, once there's a good handle on the overall layout and flow, that's when things move into design development. That's the next stage. In design development, that is where a lot of these important details that are probably floating around in your brain right now get put onto paper, ideally. But here's what I see pretty common across a lot of architects, is that even in the design development stage, the level of detail is still fairly light. Overall, there's a lot of decisions being made, floor plans still moving around, but there is an important phase in design development that there needs to be a lot of thorough conversation on. So if you're finding yourself in the design development stage now with your architect, or it will come at some point, here's some things I want you to remember and talk about with your architect. First is about material selections. Who is selecting the materials? Who's selecting the materials that are not considered design related? So we're not talking about tile, flooring, countertops, cabinetry. Those are typically all addressed by the interior design team. But you still need to have selections when it comes to construction materials. If you're wanting to build a healthy, robust home, those need to be called out too. But what so often happens is that an architectural set of plans don't actually call those materials out. I've seen a handful of plans just recently where we got brought into a project a little bit late in the game, where they were already pretty deep into their design development stage. But when I took a look at their plans and I saw a wall detail, I saw things that were called out like a WRB. This is your water resistive barrier that's going around the home. It just says WRB, to be selected by contractor. or it would just call out the foundation to be detailed in structural plans. There wasn't actual material selections. Now, yes, it's true, your structural engineer is going to be detailing out the structural components of your foundation or your crawl space, your basement, but there should be actual material selections for the most important components of your home, which is really the exterior. So have the conversation with your architect about who's going to actually be selecting these construction materials. It may not be the architect. It may be that the contractor is going to be providing specifications in their bid. It's going to look different for every project, but it's an important question for you to ask so that you don't end up during construction showing up to the job site and discovering, what is that? What is it that they're wrapping my home in? It looks like they're wrapping it in Tyvek, but I thought that I was going to be getting a zip system or some other house wrap. You do not want to have that conversation during construction. So again, to emphasize, in your architectural plans, you want to make sure that even construction materials are selected. This might not show up on your plans. It might show up in a specification document, or like I said, might show up in your architectural, or rather your construction breakdown. So aside from material selections on the exterior, it goes pretty deep, and we want it to go deeper than just call outs. When you're looking at your foundation, your exterior walls, your attic, your roof line, all of those important components should be detailed in your plans by more than just one wall section. You should have details that talk about the foundation waterproofing, talk about the exterior walls, what's happening from the interior all the way to the exterior, with actual selections. A frustrating one that happens often when we're brought in, maybe even during construction, a frustrating topic is if a contractor is coming to the homeowner during construction saying, what type of insulation do you want to use? Or even worse, if they say, hey, we're going to start the spray foam insulation next week. Meanwhile, you as a homeowner are thinking, oh goodness, I thought that I was not getting a spray foam. I thought that I was getting mineral wool or sheep's wool. That's really challenging to correct mid-construction. So again, heavy emphasis on pre-construction in your planning process. So how do you actually make sure that your plans have a high enough level of detail that you can just coast during construction? No one's actually coasting, but so that you can have confidence and breathe easier during construction. Because again, we want that to just be implementation. All the strategy should be happening during pre-planning is when the strategy should be happening. So aside from what I already talked about, the foundation, exterior walls, the roof, the attic line, all of that, there's more detail that needs to be had, even from just the exterior. You also want to be moving inwards and talking about your insulation, your drywall. There's more than one type of drywall that can be selected. You want to be talking about, aside from just your flooring, you want to be talking about the actual waterproofing that's happening in your bathrooms as well. So our topics really start with the exterior. Those are your one and done big items, and then move inwards from there. But your plan set should over time develop into what's referred to as construction document. So have the conversation with your architect about the schematic stage, then this design development stage. Then it should eventually land into construction documents. Those construction documents actually make up a part of your construction contract. So I will often share with clients that your plans, your specifications, and your contractor's contract, all of that together should very clearly lay out what your expectations are when it comes to avoiding formaldehyde or VOCs, or detailing of watertight windows and watertight roof. It should be clear as day to everyone who's involved with the project what the expectation is, because the other thing that this does is make for really clear and accurate bidding from your contractor. So even better when there's this high level of detail, because then that means that your construction contract and the cost of your project should also be really clear. That's good news for everyone, because if you've done a construction project before, you've probably heard of the term change orders, which is just added cost and added time to your project. So on your architectural set, you want to have clear details. These are formal architectural details. You want to have clear details, and you want to have clear specifications for everything. Foundation waterproofing, the exterior walls, insulation, drywall, even the type of lighting that's going to take place, even where the electrical panel is going to be. You want to make sure that you have an opportunity in the pre-planning stage to move those things around if you find that, hey, the architect is showing that the electrical panel is right up against our youngest kid's bedroom. Well, that's something that when construction starts, it's not an easy fix. So use the pre-planning stage to be able to move those important elements around if you can. Now, it's not always possible, but you at least want to know about it during the planning stage and have everything called out. Electrical panel. Another big one that we see so often missing is an actual formal mechanical room. This again it's not something that's easy to change during construction, but your plans should show very clearly where mechanical equipment, which would be air handler, dehumidifier, ERV, like where's all that equipment going to go? And how is it going to feed the basement, the main level, second level? How is all of that going to take place? So that's also something that should be showing up in your plans as well. But how do you know if your architectural plans are sufficient for your construction and for your vision, or how do you know if they're going to be light? A good rule of thumb is you should be looking at the level of detail in the plans. So most often that's going to look like you have a cover sheet, you have your floor plan, you have exterior elevations, you're going to have a lighting, an electrical plan. You might have something called a reflected ceiling plan, which is an RCP, reflected ceiling plan, showing what that ceiling looks like on each level of your home. And then the really important part is the architectural details. That's something that should definitely be included. And then ideally, somewhere there should be specifications, window and door selections. And then my favorite is a leak management plan. This is sometimes a different plan that we're marking up, but this is one that needs to be implemented because leaks happen, washing machines overflow, there could be a dishwasher that leaks. There's things that are out of our control besides getting things watertight at the exterior. You want to be also talking about a leak management plan. So that could be floor drains in a laundry room, could be a drain in front of a washing machine. Even we usually do one or the other, either a floor drain in the middle of the laundry room or a drain right in front of the washing machine. But also really every appliance that has a water line connection, your dishwasher, ice maker, refrigerators, freezers, those should have leak pans as well. Now, it's great to have those called out on the plans so that they don't get forgotten about during construction. The way to tell if your plans are having enough detail for construction is for you to decide if, when you are looking at your plans and looking at the specifications, because you should be familiar with your plans, when looking at your plans, do you feel like every conversation and expectation has been captured and documented? That's the thing that you should be answering yes to, meaning you've had a conversation about wanting to make sure that the water filtration system under the kitchen sink, that filtered water is also feeding the ice maker. You've probably had that conversation or maybe that thought. I know it's certainly a conversation that we have in the projects that we're consulting on. It needs to show up somewhere on the plan. So the goal is the conversations you've had, they should be memorialized in your plans or somewhere in specifications or somewhere in your project documents. If you can answer yes to that, that should feel like the weight is lifted off your shoulders during construction because you see there's a note somewhere on the plans or you see it's listed maybe in your contractor's bid price breakdown, if it hasn't been documented somewhere, it's likely going to get forgotten about. That detail of having the under-counter water filtration system also feed your ice maker, that may have been a conversation that took place 18 months prior to that unit actually getting installed. And so again, to answer the question of, do your plans have enough level of detail? The response from you should be that yes, you have full confidence in during construction that everything's been documented somewhere on the plans, somewhere in the contractor's bid, that it's not going to get forgotten about, and that you can check that off your list of a million things floating around in your brain during construction. So having a high enough level of detail to where the things that are most important to you are documented somewhere in the plans. And I'll give you an example of some of the things that we come across really often. Most recently, it had to do with a pool. So there's a 15,000 square foot home that's currently under construction that we're working on. In this particular project, the pool equipment had very limited space. There's very limited space of where the pool equipment could go. And the pool contractor established what the size of the pad needed to be. But when we took a look at the plans, we noticed that the water filtration system and the sanitizing system and a few other components that we were adding to this pool to ensure that it didn't need any chlorine, it was entirely missing. Now, this was a conversation that we had several months prior that didn't seem to get picked up on the pool plans. That would have been a very big error if it didn't get caught, because the pool location, it wasn't actually, or pool equipment location rather, it wasn't actually sufficiently sized for all the added equipment that we had talked about. So we needed to go back to the pool contractor and find a new location for pool equipment. Now, that's a big one, because if you've built a pool before, or if you're planning to, all of the equipment that's predetermined, like before they even dig the pool. So you want to make sure that the conversations that you're having are actually making it to the plans. So pool equipment, that's a big one. Another big one is always related to where the electrical panel will live, where the mechanical equipment will live. Because again, when you break ground, those are going to be predetermined, and a lot of the runs and the conduit and material for those locations, that gets implemented really early on in construction. So the goal, again, not to put even more on your plate. That's exactly what our consulting service is designed for, to take it off of your plate. But for you to really feel confident in moving into construction, you should have really good peace of mind that your expectations, all of those conversations have made it into your plans. And even better, here's one bonus tip, is when you're talking with your architect, ask if they are planning to do anything referred to as construction admin. Sometimes it's referred to as construction admin or project admin, but that is typically an added service where the architect is actually showing up on site during construction. That's something you want to happen, because they're taking their plans that they heavily detailed and they're showing up to the project and doing observations and cross-verifying what's on the plans. It's what's actually being built in the field. It is so valuable to have the architect do that. I really want to emphasize that the more observations and the more eyes on your project, the better. There was a recent project that we got involved in later in stage, even later than we ideally would be brought in. We didn't get brought into this project until mid-construction. It was a 4-year build project, and we didn't get brought in until year like 2.5. And we were able to make some really great changes, best that we could do for the stage of the project. But we called a meeting with the entire team, and we were looking at the plans versus what was actually built on site. And their exterior wall detail was actually extremely far off from what was actually built on site. And we waved the red flag, like, this is not right. How did this even get to this stage of construction? And there's a significant error in the overall thickness of the wall. So it got corrected, plans got revised, but those are the things that shouldn't slip through in construction. Like the plans should be followed. If they're not followed, there needs to be revisions. It's an in-depth process, construction. And I promise that if your plans and pre-construction phase is really dialed in, your construction phase should go much more smoothly without additional errors and hiccups, because every construction project has some level of hiccups and pivots. But goal today, I wanted to give you a bit more of maybe a bird's eye view overall of how you can scrutinize your own plans, encourage you not to rush through the pre-construction phase. Do not rush through it. I know it's at least 6 to 9 months, in some cases, 18 months of planning for your project. Do not rush through it because it will show up in construction. So scrutinize your plans, make sure that your communication that you've been having on your project is very well documented somewhere in your plans or in your construction document. And then make sure that somebody is doing some observations. Ideally, the architect is on site doing these observations, and ask questions. Ask questions along the way. And if it is important to you, I can't emphasize this enough. If it's important to you to not have an electrical panel by a headboard, or to not use spray foam, or to have a conditioned attic, if it is important to you, it must be reflected somewhere in your architectural plans and construction documents. It will get forgotten about. There's no such thing as over communication. So talk about it, email about it, text about it, and put it in your plans. That is how you make sure things get picked up. So I hope this was helpful for you. I hope this didn't add more to your plate, but if you're feeling overwhelmed in the whole planning process of your project, reach out to us. There's a link below where you can apply for consulting on your project. We work on projects nationwide, not just here in Southern California, but we'd love to make sure that you are headed in the right direction for your healthy home build.